Morning, everybody. Happy, oh my God, it's a bit chilly outside day. And welcome to the News Agenda with me, Fleet Street Fox. And today I'm joined by the Mirror's assistant editor, Jason Beattie, who, there he is there. Sometimes they pop off while I'm busy doing the introduction. So remember, this is the People's Paper Review. We want you to get into the comments, ask us your questions. We can't answer them all. We will answer the best ones, and the super best ones get one of these, a News Agenda mug. It's the present of the year. Everybody wants one. So what have we got today? Well, the Mirror has splashed on the fight to save Christmas from the new super variant of COVID known as Omicron. Doctors are calling for the government to do more, while the Health Secretary Sajid Javid says it's going to be a great Christmas. What variant? Don't be silly. Don't know what you're talking about. Inside on that morning, Better for Britain. Inside on the 4-5 spread. Morning, Mike. There's more detail with scientists saying there must be masks worn in pubs and restaurants, which the government is not saying. Schools are considering starting the Christmas holidays early. And yet a doctor, morning, Diane, yet a doctor in South Africa at the epicenter of this new outbreak, morning, Liz, this is going to go on for ages, saying it's extremely mild there at the moment. So, Jason, take us through this. Is the government being super cautious about something we don't know much about, or is it being too slow about something we know is likely to cause us a lot of problems?
There is a sense of deja vu about this, isn't it? I'm casting my mind back to a year ago when we were told it was going to be absolutely fine. Yeah, go ahead, have Christmas. And then about 4 days before, they went, nope, sorry, stay at home, can't see your relatives. The main problem they have is they know this new Omicron variant is highly contagious. I read some stats about the number of cases have gone up in South Africa by kind of gazillion, 2.2% to 9%, just like that.
Yeah.
So we know. What we don't know yet is, are the vaccines we have at the moment effective against this new variant? But worries they may not be. We just don't know. So they are, because we're in this kind of slight limbo, they are doing what could be described as the bare minimum. And that's where the controversy lies. So they've introduced mask wearing in some public spaces, but not all of them, which is very kind of curious. So you've got, you have to now wear them in shops on public transport. Good luck enforcing that, by the way. And we'll come on to this because, I don't know if you traveled on London transport recently. I have. Hardly anybody's wearing masks anymore. But not, let's say, in places like theatres. Interesting, Boris Johnson went to a theatre last week and was photographed without a mask. You can see why in pubs it's quite difficult to enforce wearing a mask, because drinking and wearing a mask at the same time are not necessarily compatible. But it is odd where you can and cannot wear a mask. I mean, the rules are probably the bare minimum. They've introduced PCR tests on when you 2 days, you have to take this 2 days after you arrive back in this country. So if you travel abroad and come back in, but not test before you fly. Again, your Labour's Yvette Cooper, the chair of the Home Affairs Select Committee, has questioned why. Because this means you can now come in potentially with the virus, go to an airport terminal, stand in a queue to get your passport stamped, stand in a queue at the luggage carousel to get your bags, wander through a busy airport, then get on public transport, and all this time you could be contagious. That's curious as well. And they are, as it has kind of emerged overnight, they're going to kind of speed up the booster program.
That would be nice. I've been trying to get mine for weeks. Jancis says, the media are loving this. Let's scare the public again, threaten them with another Christmas lockdown. The media is right here, Jancis. Well, not the media, but two members of the media. And we're trying to explain it as calmly and as sensibly on both sides and as factually as possible. So which is what we're here for. We're explaining the news agenda for you. So anyway, Jason, so they're having masks in public transport. It's going to be very difficult to enforce. They're not having it in church. That's a point.
Very good point, Henry.
Don't know. Haven't seen that anywhere. What about you, Jace?
No, haven't seen churches yet.
No, because there was ban on singing, wasn't there? A year or two ago. Now, the reason that they're getting so upset about the Omicron variant, although, as this South African doctor says, it's quite mild there at the moment, it seems to be mostly in young men, I think, where they found it, is that there are 30 different mutations on the spike protein. And this is one of the best bits about this pandemic, Jace. It's the fact that this is the pandemic we've known most about in all of human history. So it's the best possible plague we've ever had, as miserable as it has made people and as many people have died. It's still the best one we've had because we've mapped the genome of this virus. We know exactly what every single gene does. And when they spot the mutations on the spike protein, they know exactly what each of those mutations will have the effect of doing. So 20 of them are on the actual spike and 10 of them are in the top of the spike and the base and the bit that actually connects to the human, right? So those are the reasons that they think that there may be some problems with make it extra infectious, and there may be some problems with the vaccine. Some of the people who've had it do seem to have been double jabbed, although we don't know whether they've had waning immunity, perhaps because they were double jabbed early or what it might be. So that's the reason for the panic, I suppose. Kez says, do you think it's strange this new variant appeared just as more vaccinated are being admitted to hospital? Do you think it's an excuse for the vaccines not working? And they're suddenly trying to hide it. No, Kez, because we've got lots of data over the past year that shows vaccines do work really, really well. And the countries that it came out of, this particular variant in Southern Africa, have very low vaccination rates, which means you've got a big reservoir of people in which the virus can travel around and spread itself. And it's got lots and lots of opportunities to mutate and cause a super variant, which is what we've got now. And it was widely predicted as well. So, Jason, I mean, Boris hasn't been setting a great example on mask wearing, has he? And we know that sort of cuts transmission by more than half. In fact, he's actually been quite laissez-faire for a man who's nearly died of COVID already. Is he going too slowly and late like usual? We got that deja vu. Or has he learned his lesson? Is he actually being, as some of the more libertarian commentators would say, is he being too authoritarian, too early? We don't know enough yet. There's no reason to lock down.
I mean, surely the lesson we've learned from previous spikes in the virus is actually you can't act too quickly. You know, the sooner you move and the quicker you move, the more effective it is. So you do wonder. I mean, they're incredibly resistant to moving to what they call Plan B. But Plan B isn't actually that draconian. It just, encourages you to work at home whenever possible, and could involve some form of kind of COVID passport checks. These are in place in Scotland already. The use of mask wearing has always been in place in Wales and Scotland. England was the only part of Britain which kind of relaxed the rules on it. And most of the doctors, not all of them, most of the doctors say, that masks are the most effective way, along with washing your hands, of containing the virus. And it was never entirely clear why we needed to relax the rules. Apart from, as you mentioned, there's this libertarian wing of the Tory party, which somehow sees that mask wearing is some kind of great imposition on their personal liberty. I have to say, they should try spending 12 hours working in a hospital doing or A&E shift where they have to wear a mask all the time, and then they find out how uncomfortable it is to actually wear a mask. Wearing one for 20 minutes as you pop into a shop is not a great hardship, in my opinion.
No, it's not. No, and considering the breadth of some major Tory MPs, it's a blessing for everybody else. Now, Teresa says, do you think we'll be having another lockdown? Personally, Teresa, I would say probably not. If it's this difficult getting them to plan B, which is just wearing masks and working from home, then I don't think we're going to be looking at a lockdown, especially if the vaccines manage to hold it off, because so many of us are vaccinated. However, there's quite a lot of us still unvaccinated, as we've just seen. There are people who see things on Facebook and think that means that, it's all a conspiracy and nothing's working. Vaccines don't work, and therefore they don't bother having them. And if the mutations on the spike protein are as bad as the doctors at this stage fear they may become, if we see that in a few weeks, then it's possible, I suppose, but that small proportion of the population is still a big chunk of people. If they start merrily circulating Omicron, the NHS is going to have real problems. We may be looking at a lockdown in theory. What about you, Jason? What do you think?
I was just going to pick up on the point made by Amanda, who said, no, you're explaining what the government wants the MSM, that's the mainstream media, put out there. Amanda, I haven't
spoken to Boris this morning, have you?
I won't be too rude. We work for the Daily Mirror. If you ever look at the cover of the Daily Mirror, the last thing we ever do is what the government wants. We're probably its main and chief critic. Not always, but majority of the time. And we very rarely, if ever, in fact, zero of times, have ever been told by the government what to do or what to publish. And they wouldn't even try. And if they did try, we wouldn't listen. If you wish to go into your little silo and follow what you think is reliable news on social media, please do. But I promise you, the mainstream media is much more accurate and responsible.
Yeah, as you will see from those press conferences, which are being televised again now, the media from all different aspects, actually, right wing and left wing, asked some very difficult questions of the Prime Minister and the others. And those are not placed questions. They are questions that, that come up, and they ask them and they could put them on the spot. And that's what we do. Jason and I have both been journalists for a long time. Speaking for myself, I have fought the Ministry of Defence for nuclear test veterans for 20 years, and that's covered governments of every stripe, and I've treated them all the same, which is as scumbags. So off we pop onto the next one. Now, so other government great ideas in that spread there include using pharmacies to check patients that are on waiting lists, waiting to go to hospitals, even though a pharmacist is highly trained but still not hospital consultant. Well done, Dad's Army. And talking about this Dad's Army down the bottom there, page 4, of retired doctors and nurses. Now, who somehow sort of ease the waiting list. But Jason, in order to be a practicing doctor or nurse, you have to be registered. And to be registered, you have to work a certain number of hours and keep up to date with the latest medical and technological developments in medicine. So how can someone who's retired possibly keep working in a hospital if they've got to keep going in order to have their registration? Once they retire and stop doing it, they lose their registration. So we're now looking at unregistered doctors and nurses. Has Sajid Javid thought this through at all?
I don't know what age you can keep working till either in the medical profession, but I would be slightly worried about bringing back some doctors who haven't practiced for 20 or 30 years. That would alarm me. I mean, what this is about is that they know that they failed to train enough doctors over a historic period of time. That we lag behind almost every other major European country as number of doctors per patient. Kind of Germany, Italy, Spain, France all have more doctors per patient than we do. And under pressure on this, they come up with a kind of, a distraction wheeze like, oh, let's bring back some retired doctors and nurses.
Matt Hancock said something like that when he was.
They did this before. Yes, it was. I remember it was when COVID first struck. They suggested it. It's kind of, oh gosh, we're in trouble. NHS kind of press officer, find me an answer quick. And oh, we got this one, Minister. And oh yeah, that would do. That would kind of keep the critics at bay for a bit. That would keep the MSM critics at bay for a bit, Amanda.
Yes, unfortunately, because they don't all. Not everybody has the expertise to know that you're supposed to be registered for these things. Now, on that spread, they keep asking us your questions, everybody. What do you think about the Omicron virus? Do you think we're heading for a lockdown? Are you worried about your Christmas? Are you having Christmas early while you still can? or are you just going to keep your fingers crossed and hope that it works? There's someone who said it earlier on, she's never stopped wearing her mask. There are people who are still shielding, even when they've been told they don't have to anymore, because they're still worried about these things. And there are people sort of like me. I would love to get my booster jab, but I'm not due for another couple of weeks. I can't get it. So my immunity is waning. I'm a bit anxious. I have to go into town once a week to teach my university students. Alice says, I was in ICU for 7 weeks, seriously ill with COVID in hospital. I think everyone should wear their masks. Quite right, Alice. You'd have thought Boris Johnson, who was in a very nearly similar situation, would do much the same, but he seems to still be reluctant to wear his masks. Now, on that 4-5 spread, there's a small story about a guy down the bottom right. There's a photograph of him, Glyn Steele. He was a vegan who refused the COVID vaccine because it was tested on animals at one stage of its production. Now, I say was because he's dead now. The 54-year-old spent 2 weeks in intensive care and told his wife, Emma, I've never felt so ill. I wish I'd had the vaccine. She says he begged for it before he went on life support, but by then it was too late. His immune system was in real trouble. Now, Vanessa, we'll get to your question in a minute, but we're on vaccines at the moment. We'll come back to you, I promise. Jason, we've still got a lot of vaccine hesitancy in this country. There's about 5 million people unvaccinated, we think, at the moment, including a reasonable chunk of those who work in healthcare. And on pages 6 and 7, there's a chart of how the jab is going down worldwide. It's about 2% of people vaccinated in Uganda, 0.01% in Burundi, 1% in Yemen, Ethiopia. A lot of places, that's, according to this chart, down to disinformation, the kind of lies that we often see on this show, unfortunately, that are spread on social media, and priests and governments as well, playing down the effects of coronavirus. But it's fairly unlikely that a new variant is going to arise in Singapore, where 91% of people are double vaccinated, because there, Jason, they charge the cost of healthcare if you go to hospital with COVID to anybody who chose not to be vaccinated. Why could we do something like that here? Or is that just not on the cards?
I don't think it would happen. I don't think it would happen because it does slightly run kind of against the fundamental principle of the NHS, that it's free of points of delivery, regardless of your bank balance or your geography. So I'm slightly cautious of going down that route. And also, I mean, it is, if you do that for the COVID vaccine, where do you stop? Do you just send, like, somebody forgets to have a flu jab and they get flu and end up in hospital? Do you then suddenly charge them? So there's a kind of awkward principle you could establish there, a different precedent, which I would be fundamentally opposed to. I mean, the fundamental problem here with the take-up of jabs worldwide is not hesitancy, it's supply. And this is where Gordon Brown, whose reputation is being redeemed by the day since he left office.
I miss him.
You can always argue. I kind of was joking with everybody, who's probably the best prime minister we never had, because he was actually kind of like, we didn't quite appreciate what we had when he was in office. But, he was warning months ago that unless you get the vaccines to the majority of the population, you're going to end up with a situation where you get a mutant or a variant of the COVID, which could then come back to haunt us. And exactly what he predicted has happened. And, when you've got places in southern Africa where you've got less than 1% of the population has been inoculated, this is a risk you're always going to run. Until everyone's safe, no one's safe. And that's a global problem, not a British problem. And we need to find a way of supplying more vaccines to the poorest nations. Or these, as we know from COVID, it will always mutate. And until we vaccinate the majority of the world's population, we're going to face the dilemma we're in at this moment.
Yeah. Now, Vanessa, you want to know, my daughter and family are due here from the USA for Christmas. Will they need to cancel? There's fairly high vaccination rates in the States, isn't there, Jason? There's fairly high here. Is there any chance that the travel corridors...
At the moment, Vanessa, you don't need to cancel, but these things are changing very quickly. And the news this morning is lots of countries are shutting their borders again very quickly. For example, Japan this morning just went, nope, nobody else is coming in for a bit. Israel's already done it. So we can't tell you at this stage whether America will close its borders or the UK will close its borders before Christmas. At the moment, it's not happening.
No, well, wait and see. As Boris says, it's going to be 3 weeks before they can really assess how bad some of this stuff is, and then we'll hear more about it. Now, Richard Farragher. Morning, Richard. It's depressing to see so much anger and ignorance in these comments. I've still not fully recovered after contracting the virus in March 2020. Get vaccinated, mask up, and shut up. Thank you for popping in, Richard. Obviously, you're working for the mainstream media as well. Invoice us later, and we'll be sure to pay you. Don't worry. No, I'm joking, because we don't know Richard, and he's just someone there who's an actual patient. Please listen to him, because he does know what he's talking about. There are anti-vaxxers as well in the comments. I'm happy to deal with those if the producer wants to throw a few up. But fundamentally, we think that these vaccines that we have at the moment will probably give us some protection. And if not, they can give us a new vaccine in extremely quick double time, which is another one of the massive, massive benefits of modern science. Misty, possibly not her real name, stick my experimental vaccines for the fake bat flu that Wuhan staged as far up your arse as you bloody well can. I'd like it in my arm, Misty, if possible, because that's where it's most effective. Whether or not Wuhan staged it, we don't know. There doesn't seem any evidence of that. It's not the bat flu. It's a really serious respiratory disease that can kill people. And it's not experimental. It's been tested on millions and millions and millions of people, and it's safe, and it does protect people from hospitalization and death. So they're a great idea. And I get very upset, I'm afraid, not with people like Misty, because I don't even know if she's real, but when someone sees it's natural part of our human evolution that when we see something written down, we tend to believe it. All right. So if you see something in the press that turns out to be wrong, people feel very betrayed. When you see something on social media that someone else says is wrong, you don't get that same sense of betrayal. You still believe it. You still think, well, there's something in it. I saw something the other day, Jason, like someone posted on social media about how Ghislaine Maxwell was actually accused of trafficking 5-year-olds and that the mainstream media weren't reporting her trial. It hadn't started yet. She's not the youngest child involved in that case is 14, not 5. It's just all this misinformation. When people see it written down, they think that must be true. It sounds awful. And they spread it and spread it and spread it and spread it. Please don't do that. Please go and double check the stuff that you hear. Double check what Jason and I have said. Double check what the vaccine trolls are saying. And double check what the people who are supporting the vaccine are saying as well. You'll find out that there's lots of evidence out there and lots of fact checkers, and you can find out the truth. So please go and get vaccinated. Any questions that aren't about the vaccine, get into the comments, ask us wherever is on your mind. We'll try and answer them for you. What do you think about the chances of lockdown? Are you happy wearing a mask? Do you have any problems? Do you think people are going to do it? I agree with Jason. I don't see many people on the tube doing it, but I did see, Jason, the tube is a great, it's very good at being ventilated because the trains are just pushing stuff around all the time. And there's lots of, as long as you have the windows open on the trains, not so bad.
Question is, how does the government intend to enforce the mask wearing on public transport? Because at the moment, I mean, I was on the tube the other day, and I reckon about 50% of people were unmasked on my particular carriage. It varies obviously which carriage you get on, but there was nobody actually kind of going up and saying, "Sorry, can you put a mask on, please?" And it's been mandatory right since COVID began to wear a mask on the tube. That's and unless there's some sort of enforcement, this request is kind of meaningless. But they haven't actually suggested how they're going to do this.
No, there's a £200 fine in theory if you're not wearing a mask. But unless someone says put your mask on and then issues the penalty notice.
Yeah. And then you get the situation, I had a friend who politely asked somebody to put a mask on and got, for her trouble, she got a kind of whole lot of abuse hurled at her. So, it's really quite difficult.
Yeah.
And unless they have, bring back kind of conductors or something, I can't see how it's going to be enforceable.
No, I'm very tempted to get a mask that says, if you don't wear a mask, it's like not wearing pants. Really, I don't want to see your nutsack any more than I want to see your germs, or something like that. Especially when they wear them under their noses, on their chin as well. Oh my God! It's like wearing your pants in the wrong place. Sorry, I did say a rude word then. Sorry, everybody. Misty's made all of us a bit scary.
Horrible images in our head.
Right, we're going to move on to another story now, which is the linked issue of social care. Which you'd have thought after a pandemic we would have a very good reason to sort out by now. But no, the Mirror's Fair Care for All campaign still seems to be needed, because there's news today that 391,000 people, a third of a million people, are waiting either to be assessed for home care or for the care they've been told they should have to actually get delivered. Now, Jason, take us through it. Why is there such a backlog? What can we do about it?
Well, the first issue is there's a lack of funding. And the second issue is that the funding that is a complete postcode lottery. So if you live in one part of the country, you can apply to your local council for social care. And they can say, yeah, of course, here we are. And you can go to another one, which can be literally 20 miles away, and they have nothing. They don't even, you have no assets. You can, be living in a rental accommodation. You could be in your 80s and have zero money in the bank, and they still haven't got any social care for you because they have no budget for it. Then you've got the third problem, which is the lack of staff. I mean, we just don't have enough carers in this country. In fact, caring has one of the highest turnover rates of any profession. So, most companies have a turnover rate for staff coming and going of under 10%. With social care, it's up in the 30 to 40%. It's really high. So they can't keep staff, and the staff they do have, I mean, most of them do a wonderful job. I'm not knocking the staff for this, but it's low paid and it's really hard work. And it's looking after people who with difficult conditions is really tiring and hard. So we don't have enough staff. So lack of money, lack of staff, and then you get this situation.
Is it as well because in the past couple of years there's been a lot of focus on social care delivered in homes, and people seem to have sort of forgotten, perhaps that's where a lot of the budget's gone, and there's been less focus on the social care that's delivered in our own homes, which is a huge part of that industry. Carers coming around to see people at home because they've been...
But you're absolutely right. But I mean, everybody agrees the best care you can provide in the majority of cases is in somebody's own home, because people don't like going into residential accommodation if they can avoid it. They much rather be in their own home. It's better for the mental health, their well-being. They can be treated in their own home. But you get back to this 15-minute visit problem, where care staff basically are told they've got 15 minutes to look after somebody once a day. That 15 minutes is generally inadequate, and a lot of staff doing the 15-minute care, that 15 minutes can include travelling time, which they're not paid for. So you can suddenly see that 15 minutes comes down to a few seconds very quickly. So the care provided in people's homes is generally, not always, but it can be very inadequate.
And the government keeps saying they're fixing social care, but it isn't, and it's not. And
we're putting up taxes in April. This is the new social care levy. The majority of that money will actually go towards the NHS, not to social care. But although it's now called the Department of Health and Social Care, but the two sections have never been properly integrated. And actually, the help towards the cost of social care, that's not going to start until 2023. So you're still going to have to wait.
Yeah. Or we could just have a national care service, as I've said for so many years, and Andy Burnham agrees with me. Penny on income tax, problem solved.
Was it you or Andy Burnham who came up with it first, Susie?
Me, obviously. Thank you for taking us through that, Jason. Keep asking us your questions, everybody. How do you feel about the masks? How do you feel about there should be more masks, fewer masks? What do you think Omicron is? Are we panicking too much, or is this actually very sensible and cautious, finally, from a government that's had 2 years of not being either of those things? And that's something, again, that Boris Johnson didn't pay me to say. Like the rest of this broadcast was anti-government, but no, fine. The first bit was all about whatever Boris told me to say. But we do have some good news for you. And here it is. It's getting difficult to find these in the paper at the moment, Jason. There's an awful lot of bad news around, but here's a bit of good news. Now, a lot of us know someone who's been diagnosed with a deeply unpleasant condition. We don't all do what the former Leeds Rhino and England rugby captain Kevin Sinfield did, and run 101 miles to raise money for a new motor neurone disease centre in Leeds in honour of his mate Rob Burrow, who's been stricken with that disease. He's raised almost £5 million already, and there's been talk of a knighthood. But there's here's the good bit, Jason. He says he'd far rather than have any knighthood is raise money for research into a cure for MND. So is this proof that what your mother always told you was right? Doing good is reward enough in itself.
Yes. Isn't he amazing?
He's fantastic.
He ran 101 miles non-stop. I mean, this is from Leicester to Leeds. That's crazy.
Did he not even stop for a cup of tea and rest his feet?
He just did it.
I mean, I'd have had to sit down. I
would have pulled into a service station. I would have gone to a motel.
Scotch egg break at some point.
Yeah, I would have. It's really quite impressive, and that's like raised £2 million already, and he raised 2.7 million by doing back-to-back marathons.
He's on 5 now. He's on 5 million total.
Yeah,
so we're
it's
a
incredible.
lot closer to that research centre in Leeds he's trying to build. So we'll see if we can find a link to his fundraising and stick it in the comments for people to contribute to if they want to.
I thought you were going to use the good news as the people stuck in the pub up in Yorkshire.
No, that's bad news, because you don't want to know why?
Why?
They're stuck with an Oasis tribute band.
Yeah, they wanted a Blur tribute band, didn't they?
Who wants to be stuck with a fake Liam Gallagher?
My wife lives 5 miles. Was brought up 5 miles from that pub, and every time it snowed, they used to go up there deliberately because they knew they'd get locked in.
Yeah, I'm sure they just book some holiday and just go, right, that's it, we're off there.
Yeah.
I think it would be good news if Noel Gallagher was trapped in there with an Oasis tribute band. That would be funny. And Gina says, do they really believe this is journalistic truth? About the pub, I'm assuming you're talking about the vaccines and the Omicron variant. Gina, it's been verified. The genome is published. Doctors and scientists all around the world work on it. If this is a conspiracy, then it involves, let's see, the Yorkshire Ripper, because he's died of it, Boris Johnson, every world leader, and the only people who are kind of figuring it out are the likes of you on Facebook without any epidemiological or vaccinology background. All the vaccinologists, all the epidemiologists, all the doctors, and all the countries all around the world going, no, you need to see this. And look, here's a picture of the genome. Seriously, yes, it's journalistic truth. It's been verified. Liz says, what about the other people dying of other deadly diseases who can't get treated? And this is a good point, Jason, because there's a huge backlog in the NHS. I know people who are waiting for outpatient appointments for minor things that aren't life-threatening, who still, they just can't even get an appointment for it. If Omicron does get bad, then the chances are the NHS is going to find it very difficult to deal with some of these other problems.
This makes a very sensible point. But, the waiting list for the NHS treatment in England now is about 6 million. It's the highest it's ever been. And not all of those are for minor procedures. But some of them are very serious. There's warning last week by Macmillan, but the cancer care backlog, they were starting to eat into it. It's now starting to rise again. The only thing you can suggest is, but this was always their worry, but a new variant came along, and the winter crisis, which is being fueled anyway by a possibility of a flu crisis, puts us right back to where we were at the beginning. So, get jabbed, wear a mask. Don't do like Boris Johnson does. That's my advice.
Unless he tells you to get the vaccine, of course. Megan says, what are the chances of lockdown? We discussed this earlier, Megan. I would put it about 1 in 3. What about you, Jace?
I'm not going to put I'm not as bold as Susie, obviously, but I'm not ruling it out. It's partly just, Megan, we can't answer the question. We just don't know enough about Omicron yet. We just, if we find out that it is mutating really fast and it's vaccine resistant, then, you can't rule out a lot.
It's a very sticky wicket.
Yeah, but when we know more, we'll be able to tell you more, I'm afraid.
Yes, that's because we don't make stuff up and say whatever the government wants. We wait until there's facts. Now, Samantha says, how about we talk about the fatalities of the vaccination? Okay, the fatalities of the vaccination are teeny tiny proportions of the total. Teeny tiny, right? And there's a lot of people who say, oh, we've had a miscarriage after having had the vaccination. Oh, someone's died after the vaccination. Oh, they've had a blood clot after the vaccination. I could fall down the stairs today after having had my cup of tea. That doesn't mean the cup of tea caused my falling down the stairs. It's probably something entirely unrelated. You get vaccinations for lots of different things over the course of a year. The chances are something will happen to you after you've had one of them. It doesn't mean that the vaccination was responsible. Vaccinations are great, wonderful things. And if you told a caveman about them, he would cough and splutter and die at 40 while telling you that he wished he could get vaccinations. So get your vaccinations. The fatalities are very, very small, and they are also factually verified. Do we have any more questions, or is that the only one? I think that's the last lot. We're probably rounding up. Okay. Thank you, everyone, for joining me. Thank you, Jason, for explaining all that. Thank you, the government, for not paying me to say any of this stuff. And remember, everybody, go and check and verify. You can find out anywhere you like on the entire world's human knowledge at your fingertips here on the internet. Do not just listen to some bloke on Facebook. Go and find out properly for yourself, and hopefully we'll all get through this. We will see you again on Wednesday for another edition of the Omicron News Agenda. Hopefully we might have some better news for you. Bye-bye.